When most of us catch someone lying, our first instinct is to call it out directly. It feels natural, it feels honest, and it feels like the quickest way to cut through the nonsense. We want to stop the lie in its tracks by saying the 4 words that feel the most powerful in that moment. You're lying to me? But here's the truth, those 4 words rarely work the way we think they will. In fact, most of the time they make the situation worse. The second you tell someone you're lying, you put them on the defensive. Human nature kicks in. The brain's natural response to accusation isn't to fold and confess, it's to fight, deny, or double down. And so instead of peeling back the lie to get to the truth, what you've done is build an even higher wall between you and honesty. Think about it. When has anyone ever admitted to lying the moment they were accused? Hardly ever. Because admitting to a lie doesn't just mean owning up to the false words. They're also admitting they broke your trust. They're admitting that their credibility, their reputation, and sometimes even their relationship with you is at risk. That's not an easy thing to do. So what happens instead? They defend, they get louder, they try to flip the blame. Suddenly, you're not talking about the lie anymore. You're in a battle about your tone, your approach, or your own fair judgment of them. The truth you were chasing gets lost in the noise. This is why calling someone a liar almost never leads to resolution. It creates resistance. It transforms what could have been an opportunity for truth into a fight for survival. And let's be honest, when people feel attacked, they're not interested in being honest. They're interested in protecting themselves. That's human psychology. So, when you say you're lying, you may be technically right, but you've shut the door on actually uncovering the truth. There's another problem too. Labeling someone a liar makes the entire conversation about their character instead of their actions. You're not just saying, that statement isn't true. You're essentially branding them with a title, and titles stick. No one wants to wear the badge of liar, even if in that moment they've told one. So rather than reflecting, they react. They feel judged, attacked, and dishonored. And the natural human response to that, to push back harder, to entrench themselves deeper into the falsehood, and to try to prove you wrong rather than proving themselves honest. And here's where we have to ask ourselves, what's the goal in these conversations? Is it to win an argument, or is it to get closer to the truth? Because if your goal is to win, then go ahead, call them a liar, slam the gavel, and declare victory. But if your goal is to actually understand what's real, then you need a better strategy. You need to recognize that calling someone a liar might feel powerful, but it's actually weak communication. It's the shortcut we take when we want immediate relief from the discomfort of dishonesty. But shortcuts don't build bridges, they build walls. Now imagine it from the other person's perspective. Let's say they are lying, but maybe it's because they're embarrassed. Maybe it's because they're afraid of consequences. Maybe it's because they don't want to disappoint you. None of those excuses justify lying, but they do explain why someone might do it. And when you hit them with, "You're lying," you don't leave any room for them to come clean. You force them into a corner where the only option is to deny harder. In that moment, the possibility of them correcting themselves or softening their stance is gone. Instead of leaving the door cracked open for truth, you've slammed it shut. There's also the subtle dynamic of control. When you call someone a liar, you think you're taking control of the situation. But in reality, you're giving it away. You've shown your hand. You've revealed that you're upset, frustrated, maybe even angry. And now the liar knows exactly how to play you. They can turn the conversation into one about your temper, your accusations, or your lack of trust. They steer the spotlight off themselves and onto you. Suddenly, they're not the one scrambling, you are. And they accomplished it simply because you uttered those 2 words, "You're lying." This is why restraint matters. This is why wisdom in communication matters. The power move isn't in the accusation. The power move is in staying calm, keeping the other person talking, and creating space for the lie to collapse under its own weight. The best interrogators, negotiators, and communicators in the world don't go around shouting, "You're lying," every time they hear something suspicious. They stay curious. They ask questions. They observe. Because they know that truth has a way of surfacing when the environment allows it to. Lies, on the other hand, suffocate under pressure. But it has to be the right kind of pressure, not the heat of accusation, but the quiet weight of consistency, patience, and composure. So, the problem with calling someone a liar isn't just that it offends them. It's that it sabotages your own goal. It locks the truth further away instead of drawing it closer. It hands the liar an escape hatch instead of tightening the circle. It makes the conversation about your accusation instead of their deception. And worst of all, it drags you into the chaos of defensiveness where no real progress can be made. The next time you feel that urge to blurt out, "You're lying," remember this: what you want isn't to win the moment, you want to win the truth. And winning the truth requires patience, strategy, and calm presence. It requires choosing a path that may not feel as satisfying in the moment, but will be far more effective in the end. When someone lies to you, the hardest thing to do is hold back the urge to call it out. Your mind is screaming, that doesn't add up, and your instinct is to shine a big spotlight on the inconsistency. But here's the thing, accusations rarely uncover truth, they only invite resistance. That's why one of the most powerful tools you can use is not accusation, but curiosity. Instead of saying, you're lying, try asking questions. Not loaded questions, not sarcastic ones, but clarifying questions that sound genuine. Because questions do two things at once. They force the other person to keep talking, and they give you more information to work with. Think of it like this. A lie is like a flimsy structure. On the surface, it might look solid. It might even be convincing at first glance. But the more weight you put on it, the more likely it is to crumble. And asking clarifying questions is the way you add weight. The person lying has to keep stacking details on top of details, and eventually, if it isn't true, the whole thing buckles under the pressure. But if you go in guns blazing with, that's a lie, they don't feel the need to expand. They just dig in their heels and shut you out. A good clarifying question sounds like, help me understand what you mean by that, or can you walk me through that again? Notice how those phrases aren't threatening. They don't shut the door, they open it. They don't declare war, they invite dialogue. And that invitation is exactly what a liar doesn't want but is forced to accept. They now have to stretch their story. They have to revisit their details. They have to fill in blanks they weren't planning to fill. And here's where human nature works in your favor. Most people are not skilled liars. They can spin one story, maybe two, but the more they have to elaborate, the more cracks start to show. Imagine you're talking to someone who claims they were at the office until late. You know something about their story doesn't fit. If you say, you're lying, I know you weren't there, they'll simply deny it. Conversation over. But if you respond with, so you were there until 7, who else was still in the office with you? You're not accusing, you're asking. And now they either have to commit to more details, which might not align later, or they stumble because the lie wasn't built with that much structure. The beauty is, you're not forcing the truth out. You're giving them the rope to reveal it themselves. Asking questions also buys you time. When emotions are running high, time is your best ally. By asking instead of accusing, you give yourself a moment to breathe, to listen, and to observe. You get to study their body language, their hesitation, their tone of voice. A liar often reveals themselves in how they speak more than in what they say. And if you're too busy trying to win the accusation game, you miss those subtle cues. But when you're calm, curious, and asking for clarity, you're in a position of power. You're collecting information while they're scrambling to hold their story together. There's another benefit to asking clarifying questions. It keeps the moral high ground on your side. You're not the one throwing stones, raising your voice, or creating conflict. You're simply asking for more understanding. That makes it much harder for the liar to paint you as the aggressor. They can't flip the script and accuse you of being unfair because you haven't accused them of anything. You've only asked for more. And when they overact to a simple, calm question, it's usually a sign to everyone, yourself included, that something isn't adding up. Let's not forget that sometimes what feels like a lie might actually be a misunderstanding. We're quick to jump to conclusions, but memory is imperfect, and people explain themselves poorly all the time. When you lead with questions, you give space for those misunderstandings to be cleared up without burning bridges. You may find out that what sounded suspicious at first actually had a reasonable explanation. By asking instead of accusing, you protect relationships that might otherwise get damaged by unnecessary confrontation. But when it is a lie, questions are still your most effective weapon. Because they're subtle. They don't corner the liar in a way that makes them defensive. They corner them in a way that makes them work harder. And the harder they have to work, the easier it is for you to see the weak spots. Imagine a chess game. The impatient player lunges at the king, but a smart opponent sees it coming and blocks. The skilled player, though, quietly applies pressure piece by piece until the opponent has nowhere left to go. That's what clarifying questions do in conversation. They apply pressure slowly, patiently, without raising alarms. And here's the real power. Asking questions puts you in control of the conversation without looking controlling. The layer feels like they're still talking, still spinning, still holding their ground. But you're the one steering, you're directing the pace, the depth, and the focus. You're not chasing the truth, you're guiding them toward it. And when they finally slip up, it won't be because you forced them into confession. It will be because they boxed themselves in with their own words. So the next time you catch yourself about to say, that's not true, stop. Take a breath, ask a question instead. Something open-ended, something that makes them explain, something that sounds more like curiosity than confrontation. Because questions don't just uncover facts, they uncover truth. And when you make curiosity your strategy, you'll discover that most lies can't survive under the weight of their own details. One of the most overlooked but powerful tools in handling dishonesty is something so simple that most people dismiss it, repeating back what someone has just said. At first, it might sound almost too basic, like you're just echoing words without adding anything new. But here's why it works. When you repeat someone's words back to them, you force them to hear their own story out loud. You shine a mirror on their statement, and mirrors have a way of making flaws visible. A lie that sounded strong in their head often starts to feel weaker once it's repeated back clearly, calmly, and without judgment. Think about the nature of lies. Lies are built quickly, often in the moment and without much structure. They're crafted to solve an immediate problem, to avoid blame, to cover embarrassment, to dodge accountability. They are rarely designed to withstand scrutiny, and repeating words is scrutiny in its simplest form. You're not arguing, you're not accusing, you're just holding up the statement like a mirror and saying, "This is what I heard you say." And when a liar hears their own words reflected back, they feel the weight of them. Sometimes that alone is enough to make them hesitate, backtrack, or stumble. For example, let's say someone tells you, "I left the office at 7, went to the store, and then came straight home." Instead of accusing them of lying, you could calmly say, "So, you left at 7, stopped by the store, and then went straight home." That repetition doesn't sound threatening, but it forces them to relive the exact story they just told. If it's true, no problem. It still lines up. But if it's a lie, that repetition puts pressure on them in a subtle but powerful way. Because the truth is easy to repeat. Lies are not. Lies get heavier each time they're spoken. And if the story is false, they'll feel that weight. What makes this so effective is that it removes the usual trigger of defensiveness. You're not saying, "That doesn't sound right," or "You're making that up." You're not even adding your opinion. You're simply echoing their words back to them. And the mind responds differently to a reflection than to an accusation. With accusation, the brain prepares for battle. With reflection, the brain gets confused. It starts second-guessing. The liar hears their own words hanging in the air, and part of them wonders if they sound as believable as they did in their head. That moment of doubt is where cracks begin to form. Another subtle benefit is how repeating words slows down the conversation. Lies depend on momentum. The faster the liar moves, the less time you have to think, question, or catch the inconsistencies. But when you repeat their words, you hit pause, you create space. The conversation stops rushing forward and starts looping back. And in that loop, the liar has to live with their own words longer. They have to carry their story for more than a moment, and that's when it starts to sag under its own weakness. Now, let's look at the other side. Sometimes you think a lie might just be poor communication. Maybe the person didn't explain themselves well. Maybe you misshared. When you repeat their words, you also give them a chance to clarify. They might say, "Oh no, I didn't mean I went straight home after the store. I stopped by my friend's place first." Suddenly, you're no longer stuck in suspicion. You've opened the door for clarification, and sometimes that clarification turns what felt like dishonesty into simple misunderstanding. This means that repeating words isn't just a way to expose lies. It's also a way to protect relationships from unnecessary damage. There's also a psychological dynamic at play. When someone knows they're being listened to carefully enough that their words are being repeated back, they feel seen. And when they feel seen, they feel accountable. That accountability alone makes it harder for a lie to live. It's one thing to toss out a quick story and hope no one notices. It's another thing entirely to hear your own words echoed back, knowing the other person is paying full attention. That attention is pressure, and pressure is the enemy of falsehood. It's important, though, to deliver the repetition in the right tone. If you sound sarcastic, mocking, or aggressive, you lose the effect. The liar won't feel pressure from their own words. They'll just feel attacked by yours. The secret is calmness. Say it slowly, evenly, as if you're simply making sure you understood correctly. That neutrality is what makes it powerful. Because the liar can't accuse you of being unfair when all you've done is repeat what they said. And if they start backpedaling, you don't even have to point it out. They've revealed it themselves. Over time, this practice also changes the way you approach dishonesty in general. You stop feeling the need to pounce on every inconsistency. You stop being the person who yells, "That's a lie," and instead become the person who calmly holds up the mirror. And here's the thing, people respect that. They may not admit it in the moment, but deep down, they know that calm composure carries more authority than frantic accusation. You're not dragged into their chaos. You don't match their energy. You stay grounded. And when you're grounded, the truth has a way of rising to the surface on its own. So, the simple act of repeating someone's words isn't about playing games or being manipulative. It's about shifting the balance of power in a conversation. It's about making the truth easier to see without ever raising your voice. It's about giving lies the chance to collapse without you having to push them over. And most importantly, it's about protecting your peace while still pursuing honesty. Because when you mirror someone's words, you're not just echoing sound, you're reflecting reality. And reality, given enough time and space, has a way of revealing itself. Silence might be one of the most underestimated tools you have when you're dealing with dishonesty. Most people think the way to catch a liar is to talk more, to argue harder, or to throw more evidence at them until they finally give in. But the truth is, sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is stop talking altogether. Silence has a way of creating space that words cannot. It's uncomfortable, it's heavy, and for someone who's not telling the truth, that silence can feel unbearable. They want to fill it. They want to explain more. They want to smooth it over. And in their rush to do that, they often reveal the very cracks in their story that you've been looking for. Think about the last time you were in a conversation and there was an awkward pause. Didn't it feel like forever? Even if it was only a few seconds, your brain probably started racing, asking, should I say something? Should I move on? Should I explain more? That's the power of silence. It magnifies everything. Now imagine that same pause in a conversation where someone is lying. Their heart rate is already elevated, their brain is already working overtime to keep the falsehood alive, and then suddenly you don't respond, you just let their words hang in the air. What happens? Their mind scrambles. They think, do they believe me? Did I say too much? Should I add more details? And in that scramble, lies start to unravel. This works because lies need momentum to survive. A liar thrives on keeping the conversation moving quickly. The faster they talk, the less time you have to think about what they just said. It's like they're trying to run downhill before you notice the stones slipping under their feet. But when you introduce silence, you stop that momentum cold. You put up a wall. Suddenly they're stuck in the moment, forced to sit with what they just said. And for a liar, sitting with their own words is often the most uncomfortable place to be. Now, silence doesn't mean sitting there with a smirk or glaring at them like you're playing a detective in a movie. That kind of silence comes across as staged and aggressive, and it'll only trigger defensiveness. The silence I'm talking about is calm, neutral, and natural. It's simply choosing not to rush in with a response. It's letting the other person carry the weight of the conversation for a little longer than they expected. Maybe they pause and repeat themselves. Maybe they add unnecessary details. Maybe they even contradict something they said earlier. That's the beauty of silence. You don't have to force anything. The layer does the work for you. It's also worth noting that silence isn't just about exposing dishonesty. It's also about giving yourself room to stay composed. When you feel that surge of emotion, when your chest tightens and you're tempted to snap out, that's a lie. Silence gives you a buffer. It lets you breathe. It lets you collect yourself. It gives you time to choose a response instead of reacting impulsively. In that sense, silence isn't just a strategy against them, it's a strategy for you. It keeps you in control. There's another layer to this. Silence communicates confidence. When you can sit calmly without rushing to fill the air, it shows you're not rattled, you're not desperate for answers, you're not afraid of discomfort. That calm confidence is disarming because liars expect resistance, not composure. They expect you to argue, accuse, or get emotional. And when you don't, it throws them off balance. They don't know how to play against someone who won't play the usual game. Of course, silence alone isn't a magic trick. Works best when paired with the other strategies, like asking clarifying questions or repeating back their words. For example, if you repeat their story back to them and then pause, really pause, they're often compelled to jump in and elaborate. And the more they elaborate, the more their story starts to fray. Or if you ask a simple question like, "Can you walk me through that again?" and then let silence stretch after their answer, you're signaling that you're still waiting for something more. That combination of question and quiet can be more powerful than any accusation you could throw. It's important to understand that silence isn't passive, it's active, it's deliberate. It's a choice you make to strengthen your position in the conversation. In a world where everyone is in a rush to speak, silence stands out. It creates weight. It makes the other person notice the gap and wonder what you're thinking. That wondering, that uncertainty is often what pushes them to talk more, and in talking more, they reveal what they were trying to hide. If you've ever watched a skilled negotiator or interrogator, you'll notice they use silence constantly. They'll ask a question and then just stop. They won't rush to fill the silence because they know the other person will. And in that gap, the truth usually slips out. That's not because of intimidation, but because silence creates pressure that words can't escape. People would rather keep talking than sit in the quiet, and liars especially can't resist filling that void. So the next time you're in a conversation and you sense dishonesty, remember you don't always need to speak more. You may need to speak less. Let the silence do some of the work. Let the pause stretch just a little longer than is comfortable. Let their own unease pull more words out of them than they intended to share. Because silence doesn't just expose lies, it protects your peace, strengthens your presence, and keeps the control right where it belongs with you. When you're dealing with someone who isn't being truthful, the most important tool you can carry into that conversation isn't your argument, your evidence, or even your words. It's your composure. Staying calm when everything in you wants to explode is what separates people who lose control from people who stay in control. And make no mistake, Control is the advantage you cannot afford to give away, because the second you let frustration or anger take over, you've shifted the power from your hands into theirs. A liar thrives on chaos, and the moment you lose your cool, you've given them the very environment they were hoping for. Think about it: when someone lies and you get visibly upset, who suddenly looks like the problem, not you? The liar can point to your tone, your temper, your overreaction, and use that to change the subject. The spotlight that should be on their dishonesty is now on your emotions. That's how they win. They don't win because the lie was strong, they win because you lost composure. Staying composed, on the other hand, makes it impossible for them to shift the focus. It keeps the attention exactly where it belongs, on their words and their actions. There's a psychological shift that happens when you remain calm. The liar expects resistance. They expect shouting, accusations, maybe even threats. That's what they've mentally prepared for. But when you meet their lie with calmness, you're playing a completely different game. You're showing them that their words don't control you, and that rattles them. Because lies are designed to provoke. They're meant to manipulate, to pull a reaction, to stir up confusion. When you refuse to give them that reaction, you take away their power. Composure also gives you clarity. When you're angry, your mind narrows. You miss details. You rush responses. You say things you later regret. But when you stay composed, your vision widens. You notice the inconsistencies. You catch the hesitation in their tone. You remember what they said earlier and how it doesn't line up now. Calmness sharpens your perception, while anger dulls it. That's why staying composed isn't just about looking strong. It's about actually being more effective in uncovering the truth. It's worth remembering that composure doesn't mean silence or passivity. It doesn't mean letting the lie slide or pretending nothing's wrong. It means responding with strategy instead of reaction. It means controlling your tone, your pace, and your energy so the conversation stays in your court. You can still ask questions. You can still repeat back their words. You can still hold them accountable. But you do it in a way that doesn't drain your peace. And that's where your strength shows, when you can confront dishonesty without sacrificing your own stability. Another thing composure does is protect your reputation. In tough conversations, people aren't just listening to what's being said, they're watching how it's being said. If you're the one who stays calm while the other person gets defensive, emotional, or erratic, everyone who witnesses that exchange will know where the credibility lies. Even in one-on-one situations, the liar themselves recognizes that. They may never admit it, but deep down they know composure carries authority. The person who doesn't lose control always has the upper hand, because chaos never wins against steadiness. Now, maintaining composure isn't always easy. Lies hurt. They can feel like betrayal. They can strike at your trust, your respect, even your dignity. Everything inside you wants to shout, "Just tell the truth." But here's the challenge: every time you give in to that impulse, you're fighting on their terms, not yours. The discipline to breathe, to pause, to ground yourself in calmness, that's where your true power is tested. And when you practice it, you realize something important: composure isn't weakness. It's strength under control. It's also contagious. When you remain calm, you set the tone of the conversation. The other person may try to pull you into their storm, but when you hold steady, they often end up adjusting to your level instead of dragging you to theirs. Calmness is like an anchor. It keeps the ship from drifting even in rough waters. And in conversations where dishonesty is at play, you need that anchor. Otherwise, you get tossed around by every wave of emotion and manipulation they throw at you. There's another layer to composure that often gets overlooked. It protects you after the conversation ends. When you lose control in the moment, you often walk away with regret. You replay your words, your tone, your anger, and wish you had handled it differently. But when you stay composed, you leave the conversation with your integrity intact. You can look back and know you didn't let someone else's dishonesty dictate your behavior. That self-respect matters. It builds confidence for the next time you face dishonesty, because you've already proven to yourself that you can stand firm without falling apart. The bottom line is this: composure is not just a tactic, it's a mindset. It's a commitment to yourself that no matter what someone else does, they don't get to control your reactions. And when you internalize that, lies lose much of their power, because at the end of the day, dishonesty thrives on reaction. It feeds off anger, chaos, and conflict. But when you remain calm, you cut off its oxygen supply. You stay steady while the lie crumbles under its own instability. And that's how you protect your peace, uncover the truth, and keep control, by refusing to give your composure away.